A millionaire divorced his wife without knowing she was pregnant. 9 months later, he received a call from the hospital. Only you can save your ex-wife and your twin sons. Hi, my beautiful family. Today, I want to share a truly beautiful story with you. Please don't skip it. Watch until the end, because it will touch your heart deeply. Let's begin this story with love. Some endings are written in ink, but some are carved into bone. The courtroom smelled of old wood and broken promises. Lynn Lewis sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the polished table, watching the woman across from him, the woman who used to be his, sign her name on the final page. The pen scratched against paper, a sound that seemed louder than it should have been, louder than the clock on the wall, louder than his own heartbeat, louder than the whispered conversations of other couples waiting their turn to legally end what they'd once promised would last forever. She didn't look at him, not once. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote. He could see it, the way her fingers gripped the pen too tight, the way she had to steady her wrist with her other hand, the way she'd always done when she was trying not to cry. When she finished, she slid the papers across the table toward him, and the sound they made against the wood was like something dying, like the last breath leaving a body. He'd asked for this, pushed for it, made it clear their marriage was over, and now here they were. Lynn picked up the pen before she could change her mind, before she could say something that might make him doubt the decision he'd spent months convincing himself was right. The decision Michael Paul kept telling him was necessary, that he couldn't move forward while dragging the weight of a failing marriage behind him. He signed quickly, decisively, like ripping off a bandage. The ink bled into the paper, and just like that, it was over. All the years, all the promises, all the late-night conversations about the future they'd build together, the children they'd talked about having, the dreams they'd shared, reduced to 2 signatures on a legal document that would be filed away in some government office and forgotten. She stood immediately, before he could say anything, before he could offer some hollow reassurance that they'd both be better off, that this was the right thing. The chair scraped against the floor, and she grabbed her purse with shaking hands. "Wait," he heard himself say. She stopped, her hand on the door handle, her back to him. He could see her shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath, like she was gathering strength. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said quietly. Not angry, not bitter, just sad, exhausted. Then she opened the door and walked out, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Lynn sat there staring at the empty doorway. The door swung slowly closed with a soft hiss, final, absolute. The lawyer, a thin man named Atkins with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that had seen too many endings, cleared his throat. "Mr. Lewis, the paperwork will be finalized within a few weeks. You'll receive—" "I know," Lynn said, cutting him off. He didn't want to hear the details, didn't want to think about what came next. He gathered the papers and walked out into the hallway. The courthouse was full of people, lawyers in expensive suits, families waiting for their turn, children running between benches. But Lynn felt completely disconnected from all of it. He took the stairs, needing to move, needing the physical act of going down to match the way he felt inside. Outside, rain had started to fall. Just a steady drizzle that made everything look grey and washed out. Lynn walked to his car and sat behind the wheel, holding the signed papers in his lap. He'd done it. He was free, so why did he feel like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life? His phone buzzed. "Michael Paul, it's done." The voice was crisp, eager. "Yeah," Lynn said. "It's done. Good, that's good. Now you can finally focus on what matters." Lynn looked at the divorce papers, at his signature, at the proof that he'd given up on the only person who'd ever really known him. "Sure," he said. "Listen, we're celebrating tonight. The penthouse. Bring that focus with you. Leave the past where it belongs. Time to move forward." Michael Paul hung up. Lynn sat there holding the phone, staring at the rain sliding down the windshield. The right choice. He'd told himself that for months, that he couldn't build the future he wanted while tied to a marriage that wasn't working. That love wasn't enough when everything else was falling apart. that walking away was the mature thing to do. But as he sat in his car, watching people rush through the rain with umbrellas and briefcases, he couldn't shake the image of her trembling hand as she signed the papers. The way she'd tried so hard to hold herself together, the way she'd wished him well, even though he was the one leaving. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. He didn't know where he was going, just away from the courthouse and the papers and the choice he couldn't take back. The city stretched out before him, grey and endless, and somewhere in it his wife, his ex-wife, was starting a life without him, because he'd told her to, because he'd decided she was holding him back, because he'd been so sure he knew what he wanted. The rain kept falling, and Lynn kept driving, leaving everything behind, carrying the weight of it with him anyway. Chapter 2. Hollow Rooms. Loneliness doesn't announce itself. It moves in quietly, one empty hour at a time. The apartment was smaller than she'd expected. One room with a kitchenette tucked into the corner and a bathroom that barely fit a shower. The windows rattled when the wind picked up. A constant trembling that made the whole place feel unsteady. She set down the last box and looked around at her new life. It didn't look like much. The walls were bare, except for a water stain in the corner that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been. The carpet was worn thin in places. The previous tenant had left a dying plant on the windowsill, some spindly thing with brown leaves that she didn't have the heart to throw away. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and listened to the couple next door. They were laughing about something. She could hear them through the thin walls, their voices bright and easy, the way hers used to be, the way hers and Lynn's used to be, before he decided she wasn't enough, before he sat her down and told her he needed to focus on himself, on his future, on building something that mattered, before he made it clear she was the thing holding him back. She reached for the remote and turned on the television. A cooking show. Someone was making pasta from scratch, talking about the importance of good olive oil. She turned up the volume until it drowned out the laughter next door. The days blurred together after that. She unpacked slowly, reluctantly, as if putting her things on shelves might make this place permanent, as if it might mean she was really alone now. She hung 2 dresses in the closet, put her books on the windowsill, stacked her plates in the cabinet above the sink. Everything fit. That was the worst part. Her entire life fit in this tiny room because Lynn had taken everything else. The apartment they'd shared, the furniture, the life they'd built. He'd left her with the scraps. At night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building. Footsteps above her, pipes groaning in the walls, a dog barking somewhere down the hall. She'd turn on the television again, letting strangers' voices fill the silence until she finally fell asleep. But sleep didn't bring peace. She'd wake in the middle of the night, disoriented, reaching for someone who wasn't there, someone who'd made it clear he didn't want to be there. Weeks passed and her body began to betray her in small ways. She'd wake up nauseous, her stomach churning for no reason. Food tasted different. Coffee made her gag. She was tired all the time, a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. She told herself it was stress, that her body was processing the divorce the way bodies do. That heartbreak had a physical weight. The nausea came in waves. She'd be fine one moment, then the next she'd be rushing to the bathroom, her stomach heaving even when there was nothing left to bring up. She started keeping crackers by the bed, started avoiding certain smells, started moving more carefully, as if sudden movements might trigger another episode. Her breasts ached constantly, a tenderness that made wearing a bra uncomfortable. She bought softer ones, looser shirts, blamed it on her cycle being irregular from stress. One morning, she stood in the shower until the water ran cold, her hands pressed against the tile, her head down, water streaming over her shoulders. She stayed there, shivering, until her skin turned pink and her fingers pruned. When she finally turned off the water, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her face looked thinner, her eyes looked tired, And there was something else, a softness in her body that hadn't been there before. A tenderness, a subtle fullness she couldn't quite name. She pressed a hand to her chest and winced. Then lower, to her stomach. Nothing, just skin and muscle, and the hollow feeling of being empty. But the feeling persisted, a wrongness, an awareness of her body that felt foreign. She got dressed and went to work. She'd found a job answering phones at a law office. It was temporary, easy, the kind of work that didn't require her to think or feel or be anything other than a voice on the line. The office was small and cramped, filled with filing cabinets and the smell of burnt coffee. Her desk faced a wall. She liked it that way. "Good morning, Harmon and Associates. How may I direct your call?" The words became a mantra, a script she could hide behind. She'd say them over and over, transferring calls, taking messages, existing in the spaces between other people's problems. The office was quiet most days. Just her and two lawyers who spent most of their time behind closed doors. She'd sit at her desk, answering the phone when it rang, staring at the wall when it didn't. The wall was beige, unremarkable, safe. Sometimes she'd catch herself touching her stomach without realizing it. A hand resting there, protective, aware. She'd pull her hand away quickly as if caught doing something wrong. During her lunch break, she'd walk to the park and sit on a bench. She'd bring a sandwich and wouldn't eat it. She'd just sit there watching people move through their lives. Joggers with earbuds, mothers with strollers, couples holding hands. Everyone looked like they knew where they were going. She'd watch the mothers especially, the way they pushed strollers with practiced ease, the way they wiped noses and adjusted blankets and moved through the world with a purpose she couldn't comprehend. She'd watch and feel something twist inside her chest, longing, loss, something she couldn't name. One afternoon, she saw him, Lynn. He was across the street carrying grocery bags, walking beside someone, a tall man in an expensive coat who gestured broadly as he talked. They were laughing, actually laughing. Lynn's head was thrown back. His shoulders relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in years. He looked lighter, unburdened, like divorcing her had freed him from something heavy. Her breath caught. She stood up quickly, knocking her sandwich to the ground. She moved behind a parked car, crouching down, her heart hammering. She watched them through the car's windows. Watched Lynn nod at something the other man said. Watched him smile, the smile he used to give her, before he decided she wasn't worth it anymore. They turned the corner and disappeared. She stayed behind the car for several minutes, her hand pressed to her chest, trying to calm down, trying to remember how to breathe. That night, she stood in her bathroom, staring at her reflection. The nausea had gotten worse. The exhaustion was constant now, and there was something else, a feeling she couldn't name, a presence in her body that felt foreign and familiar all at once. She pressed both hands to her stomach, felt the slight swell that she'd been ignoring, the subtle roundness that didn't match her weight loss everywhere else. "It's just stress," she whispered to the mirror. "Just grief." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Her body knew the truth before her mind did, had been trying to tell her for weeks. The signs were all there. She'd just been too afraid to see them. She climbed into bed and turned on the television. A late-night talk show. Someone was telling jokes she didn't find funny. She turned up the volume and pulled the blanket over her head. In the apartment next door, the couple was laughing again. Always laughing. The sound filtered through the walls like a reminder of everything she'd lost. And she lay there in the dark, one hand resting on her stomach, feeling something shift inside her that she wasn't ready to name. Something that would change everything. A life, maybe two, growing inside her while Lynn moved on with his new unburdened existence. She just didn't know it yet. Chapter 3. Two pulses. Some truths arrived too late to change the past, but just in time to shatter the future. The morning started like all the others. She woke to the alarm on her phone, the nausea already waiting for her like an unwelcome guest. She moved slowly through her routine. Shower, dress, coffee she wouldn't drink. The apartment was quiet, except for the sound of water running and her own breathing. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. She walked with her head down, watching her feet move one in front of the other. The sidewalk was cracked in places. She counted the cracks, focused on the rhythm of walking. Anything to keep her mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. The world tilted without warning. One moment she was standing, waiting for the bus with a handful of other commuters. The next, the sidewalk was rushing up to meet her. She felt her knees buckle, felt the pavement scrape her palms, heard someone shout, felt hands grabbing her arms, then nothing. She woke to brightness, fluorescent lights burning into her eyes. White walls, white ceiling, the chemical smell of disinfectant and something else, something antiseptic and cold that made her stomach turn. "You're awake. Good. Stay still." A nurse appeared above her, young and efficient, checking something on a monitor. The beeping was loud, too loud. Each beep felt like it was happening inside her skull. "What happened?" Her voice came out rough, like sandpaper against wood. "You fainted at the bus stop. Someone called emergency services. You've been out for a while. Do you remember hitting your head?" She tried to think back. The sidewalk, the impact, the hands catching her. "I don't know. I don't think so. We're going to run some tests. Standard procedure. The doctor will be in soon." The nurse left and she was alone with the beeping machines and the bright lights. She closed her eyes and tried to slow her breathing. Tried to think. She'd been tired, yes, nauseous, but faint. That was new. That was wrong. That was, "Hello." She opened her eyes. A young doctor stood at the foot of her bed holding a tablet. He had kind eyes and tired shoulders, the look of someone who'd seen too many emergencies. His name tag said Reeves. "I'm Dr. Reeves. How are you feeling?" "Oh, confused mostly, embarrassed." No need for embarrassment. Fainting is your body's way of telling you something's wrong. We're going to figure out what that is. He moved to the side of the bed, setting down the tablet. "Can you tell me about your symptoms? How long have you been feeling unwell?" She thought about it. Tried to remember when it started. "A few weeks, maybe more. I've been tired, nauseous. I thought it was stress. Any chance you could be pregnant?" The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy, suffocating. "No," she said automatically, then stopped, counted back in her mind. The divorce had been how long? The last time she and Lynn had been together was before that, before he told her he wanted out, before he made it clear their marriage was over, before— "Actually," she said quietly, "I don't know." Dr. Reeves nodded like this was the answer he'd expected, like he'd heard this same uncertainty 1,000 times before. "Let's find out. I'm going to do an ultrasound, just to be safe." He wheeled over a machine, helped her adjust the bed, lifted her shirt. The gel was cold on her skin. She flinched, goosebumps spreading across her arms. "Sorry," he said. "This will just take a minute." He pressed the transducer to her abdomen, moving it slowly, watching the screen with focused attention. She turned her head away. She didn't want to see, didn't want to know. If she was pregnant with Lynn's child, while he celebrated his freedom, while he laughed with strangers on the street. "Oh," Dr. Reeves said softly. She looked at him. His expression had changed. Surprise, wonder, something that made her heart stop completely. "What?" she whispered. He turned the monitor toward her. The screen was dark except for 2 small shapes pulsing in the static. 2 rhythms, 2 heartbeats, flickering like distant stars in a black sky. "Twins," Dr. Reeves said gently. "You're pregnant with twins." The world stopped spinning. Or maybe it started spinning too fast. She couldn't tell the difference. She stared at the screen, at the 2 tiny pulses, and something broke open inside her chest. Something that had been holding together by sheer force of will. "That's not possible," she heard herself say. "It's very possible. Based on the size, I'd estimate you're about 12 weeks along, maybe more. Have you had a period recently?" She tried to think, to remember. Everything from the past few months was a blur. The divorce, the move, Lynn telling her he needed to move on, the endless days of trying to hold herself together, trying to survive. She couldn't remember. Couldn't I need you to breathe, Dr. Reeves said, his hand on her shoulder. Gentle, grounding. Deep breaths. In and out. She was crying. When had she started crying? Tears were streaming down her face, hot and unstoppable, and she couldn't make them stop. She pressed a hand to her mouth, then to her stomach, feeling the slight swell that she'd blamed on stress eating and too much takeout and not taking care of herself. Twins, she whispered. Yes, and from what I can see, they're healthy, strong heartbeats, good positioning. But you're severely dehydrated, and your iron levels are low. That's why you fainted. You need to take better care of yourself. These babies need you. These babies, Lynn's babies, growing inside her while he moved on, while he started fresh, while she carried them alone, not knowing, not understanding why her body was changing. Does anyone know? Dr. Reeves asked carefully, his voice soft. The father? She shook her head. The tears kept coming, tracking down her cheeks and soaking into the hospital gown. No, he doesn't know. We're divorced. He left me. Her voice broke. He's gone. Dr. Reeves pulled over a chair and sat down beside her bed. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just let her cry. Let her process. Let her feel whatever she needed to feel. When she finally looked at him, his expression was kind, understanding. What you do next is your choice, he said. But these babies are real. They're here, and they're going to need you to be strong. Stronger than you've ever been. She looked back at the screen. The two pulses still flickering. Two lives that hadn't asked to be created. Two children who would come into a world where their father had walked away before they even existed. Can I have a minute? She asked, her voice barely audible. Of course. Take all the time you need. The nurse will come back to check on you soon. He left, taking the ultrasound machine with him. But the image stayed burned into her mind. Two heartbeats, two tiny futures depending on her. Two reasons why everything had just become impossibly complicated. She pressed both hands to her stomach, feeling the slight curve beneath her palms, feeling the weight of what was growing there, feeling the responsibility settling over her like a heavy blanket. I'll do this alone, she whispered to them. To the babies who couldn't hear her yet. To the children who would never know their father chose to leave. To the lives she'd protect no matter what it cost her. I promise. I'll keep you safe. I'll do this alone. Lynn had wanted freedom, had wanted to build his future without her. Well, he had it. And she had this. Two lives growing inside her that he would never know about, because he'd made his choice. And now she was making hers. Outside the window, clouds moved across the sky. People moved through their lives, unaware of the small miracle and tragedy happening in this room. The world kept turning, indifferent to personal catastrophes. And inside her, two hearts beat on, oblivious, persistent, alive. She closed her eyes and made herself a promise she didn't know how to keep. A promise that would define everything that came after. She would survive this. She would keep them safe, even if it meant carrying the weight of this secret until it crushed her, even if it meant Lynn would never know what he'd left behind. Chapter 4. Ghosts in Daylight. You can run from a person, but you can't run from the life you once shared. She quit her job the next day. The office manager, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a chain, looked surprised when she came in with her resignation, letter folded in her purse. Is everything all right? Patricia asked, concern softening her usually stern expression. Family situation, she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Two family situations, actually, growing inside her with every passing moment. I need to focus on some personal things. Patricia didn't press. She just nodded, processed the paperwork with quiet efficiency, and wished her well. By lunchtime, her desk was empty. She walked out with a box of her few belongings, a coffee mug, a sweater, a plant she'd never watered properly, and didn't look back. She found work answering phones from home, medical offices mostly, routing appointments and taking messages. The pay was less, but it was flexible. She could work in her pajamas, could take breaks when the nausea got bad, could exist in the small, safe world of her apartment without having to face the outside. But the outside world had a way of finding her anyway. She started showing sooner than she expected. The slight swell became undeniable, impossible to hide under loose clothing. She bought maternity clothes from a thrift store, soft, forgiving fabrics that stretched over her growing belly. Clothes that smelled faintly of someone else's life, someone else's pregnancy, someone else's joy. She moved slower, spoke less, learned to navigate the world as someone carrying a secret that grew heavier every day. Every morning she'd wake up and the secret would be bigger, more present, more impossible to ignore. Every sound became Lynn, every footstep, every voice, every car door closing on the street below. She'd be washing dishes and hear laughter outside, and her whole body would tense, listening for a voice she'd recognize anywhere, listening for the particular cadence of his laugh, the way he'd emphasize certain words. The sound that used to make her smile and now made her want to hide. She'd be at the grocery store reaching for milk and see someone in a blue jacket, the color Lynn always wore, and her heart would stop until they turned and revealed a stranger's face, a face that looked nothing like his, but for one terrible moment had been him. The city was full of ghosts, echoes of a life she'd been forced to leave behind. Every street corner held a memory. Every restaurant a ghost of a date. Every park bench a place they'd sat and talked about futures that would never come. Futures Lynn had decided he didn't want. With her, one afternoon in late spring, she needed fresh air. The apartment walls were closing in. And the babies, she'd started thinking of them as the babies, not it or them, were active, moving inside her in ways that felt like small miracles and terrible burdens all at once. She walked to the park. The same park where she'd eaten lunch during her office days. The benches were full. Families everywhere. Children on swings, their laughter cutting through the air. Dogs chasing balls. Couples walking hand in hand, lost in their own worlds. She found a spot under a tree and sat down, her hand resting on her stomach. The bark was rough against her back. The shade was cool. The world felt almost peaceful. The babies kicked. A flutter, then another. Like they were saying hello, like they knew she needed the reminder that they were there, that they were real, that she wasn't imagining this. "You're active today," she whispered. A jogger passed. Then another. The sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes, letting herself pretend, just for a moment, that everything was okay, that she was just another pregnant woman enjoying a spring day, that Lynn hadn't abandoned her before knowing about them. When she opened her eyes, she saw them, across the street, outside a cafe with outdoor seating and bright umbrellas. Lynn and the same man from before, the tall one in the expensive coat. They were walking side by side, carrying grocery bags, laughing about something, her breath caught in her chest like a trapped bird. Lynn looked good, healthy. His hair was shorter than she remembered. He was dressed well, in clothes she didn't recognize, moving like someone who'd found his footing again. Someone who'd shed dead weight and felt lighter for it. Someone who'd moved past her and found something better on the other side. She stood up quickly, instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to hide, needed to disappear, needed to become invisible. She moved behind a parked car, crouching down despite her belly, despite the awkwardness, despite everything. Through the car's windows, she watched them. Watched Lynn say something that made the other man throw his head back in laughter. Watched him adjust the grocery bags in his arms. Watched him move through the world like someone who'd left the past behind and didn't regret it for a second. Like someone who was free. They stopped at the crosswalk. Her heart was beating so hard she thought she might faint again. If they crossed. If they came to the park. If he saw her like this, pregnant and hiding behind a car. But they turned the other way, walked down the street, disappeared around the corner, taking Lynn's laughter with them. She stayed behind the car for several minutes, her hand pressed to her chest, trying to calm down, trying to remember how to breathe normally. The babies kicked again, harder this time, sensing her distress. She pressed her other hand to her stomach. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're okay." But they weren't okay. Nothing was okay. She'd just seen the man who'd abandoned her looking happier than he'd been in years. While she hid behind a car carrying his children he didn't know existed, Children he'd never wanted in the first place. Children that would have been just another thing holding him back. She walked home slowly, her legs shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. She took the long way, avoiding the main streets, keeping her head down. By the time she reached her apartment, her feet were aching and her back was burning, with that particular pain that came with carrying extra weight. She climbed the stairs. The elevator had been broken for weeks, and locked herself inside. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her belly was undeniable now, round and firm. The babies were real, growing, taking up more space every day, making their presence known in ways that couldn't be ignored. She lifted her shirt, running her hand over the stretched skin. She could see movement sometimes, a foot pressing against her from the inside, an elbow, some small part of them making their presence known, reminding her that she wasn't alone, even though she felt more alone than ever. "Your father doesn't know about you," she said to her reflection, to them. "And he's never going to. He left us. He chose to leave. And we're going to be fine without him. Just us. Just the three of us." Her voice cracked on the last word. The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. Because they weren't fine. Because she was terrified. Because every day she woke up wondering how she was going to do this alone. How she was going to raise 2 children without help, without support, without the man who should have been here but chose not to be. She lowered her shirt and turned away from the mirror, climbed into bed, turned on the television, a nature documentary, something about whales and migration and the long journeys they took across oceans. She turned up the volume and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay there, one hand on her belly, feeling the babies move, feeling the weight of everything Lynn didn't know, everything he'd walked away from before it even existed. The couple next door was laughing again, always laughing. She wondered what it felt like to be that carefree, to live a life unburdened by secrets and regret and the knowledge that someone you loved had decided you weren't worth fighting for. The babies kicked. "I know," she whispered to them. "I know." Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars passing, people living, sirens in the distance, the world spinning on without her, indifferent to her struggles. And she lay there in the dark, carrying 2 futures inside her, wondering how she was going to do this alone, wondering if Lynn ever thought about her, wondering if he felt even a moment of regret. The television droned on about whale songs and deep ocean trenches. The babies settled, and she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of oceans and drowning and voices calling her name from very far away. Voices that sounded like Lynn's, calling her back, telling her he'd made a mistake, but they were just dreams, and when she woke, she was still alone. Chapter 5. The Collapse. The body keeps score, and when the debt comes due, it comes all at once. The doctor's office was in a medical building that smelled like cleaning supplies and worry. She sat in the waiting room, filling out forms on a clipboard, checking boxes about medical history and family conditions. When it asked for the father's information, she left it blank. Dr. Okoye was a stern woman, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the forms, looked at the ultrasound images from the hospital, and frowned. "You're anemic," she said. "Severely. Your iron levels are dangerously low, and your blood pressure is concerning." "I'm taking vitamins," she said. "Not enough. You need iron supplements, and you need support, someone with you. These are high-risk pregnancies, twins, low iron, stress indicators all over your chart. Do you have family, friends, the father?" She flinched at the last word. "I'm fine, I can handle it." Dr. Okoye set down the chart and looked at her directly. "Can you?" The question hung between them, heavy, accusatory. Yes, she said, but her voice wavered. I'm not trying to judge you. I'm trying to keep you and these babies alive. Right now you're not doing that. You're barely eating. You're not sleeping. Your body is breaking down. If you don't make changes, there will be consequences. She nodded. Took the prescriptions, promised to do better, but doing better was harder than promising. The iron supplements made her nauseous. She'd take them and spend an hour in the bathroom, retching into the toilet. Food tasted wrong. Everything smelled too strong. She lost weight instead of gaining it. She tried to follow Dr. Okoye's instructions, really tried. She bought groceries that sat untouched in her refrigerator. She set alarms to remind herself to eat. She forced down protein shakes that tasted like chalk and made her stomach rebel. Nothing stayed down. Nothing felt right. The nights became unbearable. She'd lie awake, her back aching, her legs cramping, the babies pressing on her bladder every hour. She'd get up, use the bathroom, lie back down, get up again. The cycle, repeated until dawn, when exhaustion finally dragged her under. She'd fall asleep sitting up sometimes, on the couch, at her desk, in the middle of answering a phone call for work. She'd jolt awake, disoriented, her heart racing, not knowing where she was or what time it was. Her hands started shaking. Small tremors that made it hard to hold a fork, hard to type, hard to do anything that required steadiness. She dropped things constantly, a glass in the kitchen that shattered on the floor, her phone slipping from her fingers, the TV remote clattering off the coffee table. Each time, she'd stare at her hands like they belonged to someone else. The babies were getting bigger, more active. She could feel them all the time now, rolling, kicking, pressing against her ribs. Sometimes it hurt. Sometimes it took her breath away. She'd press her hand to the spot and whisper to them, telling them to be gentle, to give her space she didn't have to give. One evening she was trying to tie her shoes, a simple task that had become impossibly difficult with her belly in the way, when her fingers wouldn't cooperate. They shook too much. The laces kept slipping. She tried again. Her frustration built until she was crying, sitting on the floor of her apartment, unable to tie her own shoes. "Pull yourself together," she whispered. "You have to pull yourself together." No, but pulling together required energy she didn't have. She wore slip-on shoes after that, avoided anything that required fine motor skills, simplified her life down to the bare essentials: answer phones, sleep when she could, survive. The pain started one evening. It started low in her back, then wrapped around to her stomach, tightening, releasing, tightening. Braxton Hicks, she told herself. False labor, normal. Except it wasn't normal. She'd read all the pregnancy books. She knew the difference between practice contractions and real ones. These felt real. "Not yet," she whispered to her belly. "It's too early. You're not ready yet." The babies didn't listen. They never listened. The pain got worse as the evening went on, sharper, more frequent. She tried to work, tried to answer. The phone calls coming through, but she'd have to stop mid-sentence when a contraction hit, gripping the edge of her desk until it passed. "I apologize," she'd gasp into the phone. "Can you hold for just a moment?" The callers were patient at first, then confused, then concerned. "Are you all right?" one woman asked. "Fine," she lied. "Just fine." By nightfall, she couldn't stand upright. She made it to the couch, lying on her side, breathing through the pain. It came in waves now, regular, relentless. She counted the seconds between contractions, tried to time them the way the book said. 5 minutes apart, then 4, then 3. Too fast. Everything was happening too fast. "Please," she whispered, "please, not yet." She reached for her phone. It was on the coffee table, just inches away. She stretched. Her fingers brushed the edge. She tried to grab it. Another contraction hit, harder than the others, a vice tightening around her middle. She cried out, her hand pulling back instinctively, and the phone skittered off the table. She heard it hit the floor, heard it slide under the couch. "No," she gasped. "No, no, no." She tried to move, tried to reach it, but the pain was too much. Her body was fighting against itself, the contractions, the weakness, the exhaustion, all combining into something she couldn't overcome. She slid off the couch, onto her knees, crawled toward the couch, reaching underneath, her fingers searching in the dust and darkness. The contractions were coming faster now. She could barely catch her breath between them. Her vision was blurring at the edges. She was sweating and shivering at the same time. "Help!" she called out. Her voice was weak, barely audible. "Someone help me!" But the walls were thick. The couple next door was gone. The building was quiet. Another contraction, the worst one yet. She curled into herself, her forehead pressed to the floor, her hands clutching her stomach. She could feel something wet between her legs. Blood or water or both, she didn't know. She tasted copper. Blood. She'd bitten her tongue without realizing it. The room was spinning. The ceiling fan above her rotated slowly, hypnotically. She watched it turn, counted the rotations, lost count, started again. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the babies. "I'm so sorry." She thought about Lynn, about how he'd left her, about how he didn't know, about how if she died here, alone on this floor, he'd never know what he'd abandoned. He'd never know he had sons, would never know they existed, would go on with his life, thinking he'd made the right choice. The darkness at the edges of her vision was spreading, soft, almost welcoming, like falling asleep, like letting go. She heard her own voice, small and desperate, echoing in the empty room, "Please, not yet." Then nothing. The silence stretched, long and complete. The only sound was the ceiling fan turning and her shallow breathing getting shallower. The neighbor's dog started barking. Loud, persistent. It barked and barked until finally the neighbor came out to see what was wrong, stood in the hallway, heard something through her door. A sound, a moan, something wrong. "Hello?" the neighbor called. "Are you okay in there?" No answer. "I'm calling emergency services," the neighbor shouted. The ambulance siren was the first thing she registered. Far away at first, then closer, then deafening. Someone was shouting. Hands on her body. "Lights too bright. Movement too fast. We're losing her," someone said. The voice was urgent, professional, scared. She tried to speak, to tell them she was still here, still fighting. But the words wouldn't come. The siren wailed as they raced through the city. Inside the ambulance, her heartbeat flickered on a monitor, weak, irregular, fading, like a light being slowly turned off. The paramedic kept talking to her, kept telling her to hang on, kept saying they were almost there, but his voice was getting distant, fading like everything else. She thought about the babies, about Bill and Balmer, the names she'd chosen, about whether they'd survive without her, about whether Lynn would ever know they existed, about whether any of this mattered. The ambulance doors burst open. Bright lights, running, voices overlapping. She was being moved, lifted, rushed somewhere. Then nothing, just the slow fade into darkness. And the last thought she had before everything went black was, "He'll never know. Lynn will never know what he left behind." Chapter 6. The Red Search. In the space between life and death, the past becomes the only future. The delivery room was chaos dressed as medicine. Doctors and nurses moved in synchronized urgency, their voices clipped and efficient, calling out numbers and medical terms that meant life or death. The air was thick with tension, with the metallic smell of blood, with the desperate energy of people fighting against time itself. Dr. Okoye stood at the center of it all, her hands steady despite everything, delivering 2 babies who came into the world silent and blue. She delivered hundreds of babies in her career, thousands maybe, but these 2 felt different, heavier, like the weight of their mother's solitude had transferred to them. The first twin emerged limp. No cry, no movement, no pink flush of life. A nurse swept him away to a warming table. working on him with practiced desperation, suction, stimulation, oxygen. Her hands moved quickly, professionally, but her face showed the strain of fighting against the inevitable, of trying to coax life into a body that hadn't decided yet whether living was worth the fight. The second followed quickly, just as silent, just as still. Another nurse, another table, another fight against death. Two tiny bodies that should have had months more to grow, to strengthen, to prepare for the world they'd been forced into too soon. And on the delivery table, she was bleeding out. BP dropping, someone called. 80 over 40. She's crashing. Hang another unit, Dr. Okoye ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. And get me lab results, now. Blood flowed too fast. Her body had given everything to bring these babies into the world, and now it was giving up, surrendering. Her heart rate stuttered on the monitor like a car engine dying. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, the kind that meant the body was fighting to survive but losing the battle. The machines around her screamed warnings that everyone in the room understood, but no one wanted to acknowledge. They'd seen this before, too many times. A body pushed beyond its limits, a woman who'd carried too much weight alone, a system shutting down because it had nothing left to give. Doctor, the babies aren't responding. Dr. Okoye looked up. Across the room, two tiny bodies lay under warming lights that made their translucent skin look even more fragile. Two nurses working frantically, their movements becoming more urgent, more desperate with each passing second. Two children suspended between this world and the next, caught in that terrible space where medicine could only do so much, and the rest was up to forces beyond anyone's control. Keep working, Dr. Okoye said, her voice firm, commanding. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop. She'd lost patience before. It was part of the job, part of being a doctor in a world where not everyone could be saved. But she wasn't going to lose this one. Not this mother. Not these babies. Not tonight. She turned back to her patient, the woman who'd come in alone, who'd carried twins with no support, who'd collapsed and nearly died before anyone found her, the woman whose intake forms were blank except for basic information. No family, no friends, no one waiting for her in some lobby wondering if she'd survive. The woman whose body was now failing in every measurable way. We need more blood, Dr. Okoye said. Check the database. Find a match. A technician, a young man with nervous hands named Torres, was already at the computer. His fingers flew over the keyboard with the kind of speed that came from doing this too many times. Too many emergencies. Too many searches for blood that would save lives. On it, what's her type? AB negative. Torres's fingers flew over the keyboard. Seconds passed. Too many seconds. He frowned, clicked, searched, frowned deeper. His shoulders tensed in a way that told Dr. Okoye the answer before he spoke. Doctor, we have a problem. Dr. Okoye didn't look up from her work, her hands still trying to stop the bleeding that wouldn't stop, blood pooling faster than they could replace it. Talk to me. There's no match in the database. AB negative is rare. We don't have enough in stock, and the regional banks are depleted. There was a major accident earlier. Multiple casualties. They cleaned us out. Then widen the search. Go statewide. National if you have to. That'll take time we don't have. The monitor beeped a warning. Her blood pressure dropped again. 60 over 30, critical. The kind of numbers that meant minutes, not hours. The kind of numbers that meant prepare for the worst. Dr. Okoye made a decision. The kind of decision that separated good doctors from great ones. The kind that bent rules but saved lives. Check her records. Emergency contacts, family, anyone who might be a match. A nurse, Pilar, with kind eyes and quick hands and a reputation for never giving up, grabbed the intake file. She flipped through pages of mostly empty forms. No family listed, no friends, no support system at all. Just a woman alone in the world, facing the biggest challenge of her life, without anyone to hold her hand. There's nothing here, Pilar said, frustration creeping into her voice. She'd seen too many women like this. Too many people who fell through the cracks. She came in alone. All the forms are blank except... She stopped, squinted at the page, looked closer. Except what? There's an old emergency contact in the hospital system. From before. Must be from a previous visit. Who? Lynn Lewis, listed as husband. But there's a note here, divorced. He divorced her. The contact is outdated. She probably forgot to update it. Dr. Okoye looked at the woman on the table, at the twins fighting for life across the room, at the blood pressure numbers that kept dropping like stones in water, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Call him, she said. Call him now. Pilar hesitated. Her training told her not to contact ex-spouses, that divorce meant cutting ties, that the past should stay in the past. If he divorced her, I don't care if he left her. I don't care if he broke her heart. I don't care if he never wants to see her again. I care about keeping this woman and these babies alive. Make the call. Pilar grabbed her phone, found the number in the system, dialed with shaking fingers, whispered a prayer under her breath. It rang and rang and rang. In the neonatal corner, one of the babies made a sound, a small wet gasp, then a cry, weak but present, like a kitten mewing for its mother. The nurse working on him, Rodriguez, a veteran who'd seen hundreds of premature births and knew which ones would make it and which ones wouldn't, looked up with relief. We got one, she called. Baby A is breathing. The second baby followed moments later. Another gasp, another cry, both weak, both struggling, but alive, fighting, proving that life wanted to continue even when the odds said it shouldn't. Dr. Okoye allowed herself 1 second of relief, 1 moment to acknowledge that at least the babies had a chance, then turned back to the mother whose chance was slipping away with every heartbeat, with every drop of blood that pooled where it shouldn't. Still no answer on that call? Pilar shook her head, her jaw tight with tension. It went to voicemail. I'll try again. She dialed. It rang. Across the city, in a restaurant with low lighting and expensive wine, Lynn Lewis sat at a table with Michael Paul, celebrating freedom he'd convinced himself he wanted. His phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He glanced at it and turned it face down. Spam probably, or a wrong number. Nothing that couldn't wait. Everything good? Michael Paul asked, raising his glass. Fine, Lynn said. Just spam, probably. The phone buzzed again. Popular tonight, Michael Paul said with a grin. Want to get that? Lynn looked at the phone. Unknown number. Again, but it was probably just telemarketers. Someone trying to sell him something he didn't need. No, he said. It can wait. In the delivery room, Pilar hung up. Dialed again. Held the phone to her ear like a prayer, like a lifeline thrown into dark water, hoping someone would grab it. Come on, she whispered. Pick up, please pick up. The restaurant was loud. Conversation and laughter and the clinking of glasses. The sound of people enjoying life while somewhere across the city, someone was dying. Lynn tried to focus on what Michael Paul was saying, something about celebrations and future plans and the world they were building, but his attention kept drifting to his phone. It buzzed a third time. You should get that, Michael Paul said, his grin fading to concern. 3 calls in a row. Might be important. Lynn picked up the phone. Same unknown number. 3 calls in a row. That wasn't spam. That was something else. Something urgent. Something that made his stomach clench with instinctive dread. Excuse me, he said, standing. I should take this. He walked toward the restaurant entrance, weaving between tables full of people who didn't know that across the city, 2 lives hung in the balance. 3 lives, pressing the phone to his ear. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, professional but desperate. The voice of someone who'd learned to deliver terrible news without breaking. Is this Lynn Lewis? Yes, who is this? This is Pilar from City General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife. Lynn stopped walking. The restaurant noise faded to background static. The world narrowed to just this voice, this moment, this impossible statement. My wife. I divorced her. Yes, we have that noted. But your name is still listed as her emergency contact. Sir, I need you to listen very carefully. Your ex-wife is dying. Her twin sons are barely stable. She has AB negative blood. We don't have enough. We've searched everywhere. Every blood bank in the region. Every hospital. You're the only person listed in her file. Lynn felt the world tilt. Wife, ex-wife, sons, twins. The words didn't make sense. Didn't connect to anything real. Didn't fit into the story he'd been telling himself about moving on and starting fresh and leaving the past behind. I don't understand, he said. I need to know your blood type. Mr. Lewis, right now. AB negative, he said automatically. Same as... He stopped. Understood. The pieces clicking into place like a lock opening. Oh, God. Mr. Lewis. Pilar's voice was steady, anchoring. The voice of someone who delivered this kind of news before. Who knew how to keep people from falling apart. Only your blood can save your ex-wife and twin sons. The sons you didn't know existed. The phone felt heavy in his hand. Behind him, Michael Paul was calling his name, asking if everything was okay. In front of him, the door to the restaurant stood open, night air rushing in, carrying rain and the smell of wet pavement. He'd left her, divorced her, told her she was holding him back, and she'd been carrying his children. He made a choice. I'm coming, he said. Tell me where. Chapter 7, The Voice on the Line. Some calls come too late. Some come exactly when they're supposed to. Lynn stood outside the restaurant, the phone pressed to his ear, trying to make his brain work. Trying to process words that didn't make sense. Words that couldn't possibly be real. Repeat that, he said. Say it again. Pilar's voice came through steady and clear, professional but urgent. The voice of someone who delivered impossible news before. Your ex-wife is in critical condition following an emergency delivery of twin boys. She's hemorrhaging and needs a blood transfusion. AB negative is rare. We don't have enough in stock. Are you able to donate? Twin boys? Lynn repeated. The words felt foreign in his mouth. Impossible, like a language he'd never learned to speak. Yes, sir. How old? They were just born. Minutes ago. Lynn's mind raced backward. The divorce had been some time back. The last time he'd been with her was before that. Before he'd told her he needed to leave. Before he'd convinced himself she was holding him back. Before, oh God, she'd been pregnant. When he left her. When he told her their marriage was over. When he walked away thinking he was freeing himself. She'd been carrying his children. Are they mine? He asked, though he already knew the answer. The timeline. The blood type. Everything. Sir, I can't answer that. What I can tell you is that a woman is dying and 2 infants are barely stable, and you're the only person listed who might be able to help. Are you able to come to the hospital? Behind him, Michael Paul appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Lynn, everything okay? Lynn held up a hand. Wait, not now. Tell me where. Pilar gave him the address. City General. Emergency entrance. I'm leaving now. He hung up and turned to Michael Paul, his hands already reaching for his coat. I have to go. What happened? What was that? I can't explain. I have to go. Lynn moved past him, back into the restaurant, the noise and warmth hitting him like a wall. He grabbed his coat from the chair where he'd been sitting just moments ago, when his biggest concern was something he couldn't even remember now. Michael Paul followed, his voice rising with confusion and concern. Talk to me, what's going on? Nidil. My ex-wife, Lynn said, his hands shaking as he pulled on his coat. The fabric felt heavy. Everything felt heavy. She's in the hospital. He couldn't finish. Couldn't make it real. I have to go. I'll come with you. No. Lynn's voice was sharp. Then softer, realizing he was taking his panic out on someone who was just trying to help. No, thank you. I need to do this alone. He left money on the table, too much. He didn't care, didn't count it, and walked out of the restaurant into the night. The city was alive around him. Cars and people and lights. Normal life continuing, while his had just exploded into fragments he couldn't begin to piece together. He stood on the sidewalk, trying to remember where he'd parked. His mind was blank, empty, full of static. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Twin boys. His twins. She'd been pregnant when he left her. Pregnant when he told her she was the thing preventing him from moving forward. Pregnant when he signed those papers and walked away thinking he was doing the right thing, and she never told him. Why didn't she tell him? The question burned through his mind like acid. Then the answer came, just as burning: because you left her. Because you made it clear you didn't want her anymore. Because you broke her heart and walked away. Why would she tell you anything? He found his car finally, unlocked it with trembling fingers, slid behind the wheel. The engine started, and he pulled out into traffic without checking his mirrors properly. A horn blared somewhere behind him. He didn't care. Couldn't care about anything except getting there. The hospital was across town. He'd make it as fast as he could. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60. The streets blurred past, lights streaking like falling stars. He ran a red light, then another. A taxi swerved, the driver shouting something Lynn couldn't hear through his closed windows. He kept driving. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Michael Paul calling. He ignored it. All he could think about was her, alone, pregnant with his children, going through all of it without him because he'd told her he needed to focus on himself, on his future, on building something that mattered, and she'd been the thing that mattered most. The rain started as he merged onto the highway. Just a drizzle at first, then harder, the drops hammering against the windshield like they were trying to break through. The windshield wipers beat a frantic rhythm against the glass. Fast, faster, not fast enough. He thought about the last time he'd seen her. In that courtroom, the way her hand had trembled as she signed the papers. The way she'd tried so hard to hold herself together. The way she'd looked at him one last time before walking out. She'd been pregnant, carrying his children, and he'd let her walk away. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles turned white. His jaw ached from clenching. What have I done? The guilt was crushing, physical, like a weight on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Like someone was sitting on his lungs and refusing to move. The traffic was thick, despite the late hour. Red taillights stretched ahead of him in an endless line of obstacles. Lynn slammed his palm against the steering wheel in frustration. Looked for an opening. Found one. Cut across 2 lanes without signaling. More horns. More anger. He ignored them all. His mind kept playing scenarios. Her finding out she was pregnant after he'd left. Her deciding not to tell him. Her carrying them alone. Going to appointments alone. Feeling them move alone. Nearly dying alone. All because he'd decided she was holding him back. The exit came up fast. He took it too sharply, tires squealing on the wet pavement. The car fishtailed slightly. He corrected without thinking, muscle memory taking over when his conscious mind was too scattered to focus. City lights reflected off the wet pavement. Everything looked distorted, unreal, like he was driving through a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. Another call from Michael Paul, then a text. Whatever's happening, I'm here if you need me. Lynn didn't respond. Couldn't respond. There were no words for what was happening. No way to explain that he'd abandoned his pregnant wife. That he'd told her she was holding him back while she carried his children. That he might have killed her with his selfishness. The hospital loomed ahead. A massive building with too many windows and emergency lights flashing at the entrance like a beacon, like a warning, like a promise. He pulled into the emergency bay at an angle, parking crooked across 2 spaces. Didn't care. Wasn't thinking about parking or spaces or rules. He was out of the car before the engine fully stopped. Running through the rain, his shoes splashing in puddles. The automatic doors opened too slowly. He squeezed through sideways, his shoulder scraping against the frame. Inside, the emergency room was controlled chaos. People waiting on plastic chairs, nurses moving with purpose, machines beeping, a child crying somewhere. Someone arguing with the receptionist about wait times and insurance and things that seemed impossibly trivial right now. Lynn went straight to the desk, his chest heaving from the run. I'm Lynn Lewis. I got a call. My wife, ex-wife, she's here. She needs blood. The nurse looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from routine to alert. Studied him for a moment, taking in his rain-soaked clothes and wild eyes, then nodded. You're the donor? Yes, AB negative. Where do I go? Follow me. She came around the desk and led him through double doors into a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear and desperate hope. They moved quickly, past rooms with drawn curtains, hiding private tragedies, past doctors conferring in quiet voices about people Lynn would never meet, past all of it. Lynn's heart was pounding. His shirt was soaked with rain and sweat. His hands were still shaking. He shoved them in his pockets to hide it. He started. Is she going to be okay? The nurse didn't answer immediately. Just kept walking, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Finally, the doctors are doing everything they can. It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection, a non-answer that medical professionals gave when the real answer was too terrible to say out loud, which meant things were bad, really bad, which meant he might have killed her by leaving. They stopped outside a room. Through the window he could see movement. Medical staff in scrubs, machines with blinking lights, a table with someone lying on it, surrounded by tubes and wires and the desperate machinery of modern medicine. Her. His breath caught in his chest. "Wait here," the nurse said. "Someone will come get you." She disappeared through the door. Lynn stood alone in the hallway, staring through the window at a scene he couldn't fully comprehend. He could barely see her. Just a glimpse. Her face pale against white sheets. Her body still, so still, surrounded by people trying to save her life while he stood outside like a stranger, because he was a stranger. He'd made himself one when he left. The door opened. Pilar appeared. She looked exhausted, worried but focused, determined. "Mr. Lewis?" "Yes, thank you for coming. We need to move fast. Come with me." She led him to a small room down the hall. Efficient, sterile, a donation chair in the center, equipment ready and waiting, like they'd been preparing for him, like his arrival had been the missing piece they'd been waiting for. "Sit," she said. He sat. She rolled up his sleeve, found a vein with practiced efficiency. The needle pinch barely registered through the guilt coursing through his system. "This is going to take a few minutes," she said, adjusting the tube. "Try to relax." Relax, the word was absurd. He almost laughed. Relax, while the woman he'd abandoned was dying down the hall. While his sons, fought for their first breaths in some other room. While his entire world restructured itself into a shape he didn't recognize. He watched his blood flow through the tube. Red and alive, unstoppable, a piece of him traveling toward her. Toward them. Connecting him to people he'd thought he could leave behind. "The babies," he said. "Are they—" "They're breathing," Pilar said, her voice gentle. Weak but breathing. "The real concern is your ex-wife. She lost too much blood." Lynn nodded. Couldn't speak. The guilt was choking him. He watched his blood leave his body. Watched it disappear into a bag that would be taken to her. Put inside her. Keep her alive. His blood in her veins. Like they were connected again. Like the divorce he'd pushed for had never happened. Like he could take it all back. But he couldn't. The damage was done. He'd left her when she needed him most. And now she was dying because of it. "How much longer?" he asked. "Another minute." The longest minute of his life. He closed his eyes and tried to pray to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. Tried to make bargains with the universe. Tried to promise he'd be better, do better, be the man he should have been all along. If only she survived. If only the babies survived. If only he got another chance he absolutely didn't deserve. The machine beeped. Collection complete. Pilar removed the needle carefully, pressed gauze to his arm, taped it down with gentle precision. "Keep pressure on this. Don't move too fast. You might feel dizzy. Can I see her?" "Not yet. Let us get this transfusion started. Then we'll see where we are." "And the babies?" "They're in the neonatal unit, down the hall. But Mr. Lewis—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe take it slow. This is a lot to process. You just found out you're a father to twins, and their mother is fighting for her life. That's heavy." She took the blood bag and left. The door closed with a soft click. Lynn sat in the donation chair, his arm burning where the needle had been. his head spinning from blood loss and shock and the sheer impossibility of everything that was happening. Twin boys, his sons, children he didn't know existed until tonight, and her, the woman he'd loved, the woman he'd left, the woman who was dying in a room down the hall because she'd given everything to bring his children into the world. Children she'd carried alone because he'd told her she was holding him. Back he pressed his hands to his face and tried to breathe through the panic and guilt rising in his throat. What have I done? Chapter 8, Red into Red. Sometimes redemption isn't earned, it's bled. The donation room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of the machine and the sound of Lynn's blood filling the collection bag. Pilar worked efficiently, checking his vitals, adjusting the line, making sure everything was flowing properly. Her movements were practiced, automatic, the result of having done this hundreds of times before. Lynn stared at the ceiling. White tiles, fluorescent lights, anonymous, the kind of ceiling that existed in hospitals everywhere, the kind you stared at when your world was falling apart and you needed something neutral to focus on. "You're doing great," Pilar said softly. "Am I?" His voice sounded hollow, broken. "Because I just found out I abandoned my pregnant wife. That I left her to go through all of this alone. That she's dying because I wasn't there." Pilar didn't respond immediately. She'd heard enough confessions in emergency rooms to know when silence was better than platitudes. Sometimes people just needed to say things out loud without someone trying to fix them. "She never told me," Lynn continued, his voice cracking. "And I don't blame her. Why would she? I told her I needed to move on, that I couldn't build my future with her in it. I made her feel like she was the problem, like she was holding me back. Mr. Lewis, and all that time, she was carrying my children, going to appointments alone, feeling them move alone, nearly dying alone." He laughed bitterly. "I'm not doing great. I'm a monster." The machine beeped. The bag was full, red and heavy. Lynn's blood, her lifeline, the physical manifestation of a connection he'd tried to sever. Pilar removed the needle carefully, pressed gauze to his arm, taped it down with gentle precision. "Keep pressure on this. Don't move too fast. You might feel dizzy. Can I see her?" "Not yet. Let us get this transfusion started. Then we'll see where we are." "And the babies?" "They're in the neonatal unit, down the hall. But Mr. Lewis," she paused, her expression softening. "What you did, leaving her, that's between you and her. What you're doing now, being here, giving blood, saving her life, that matters too. Don't discount that." She took the blood bag and left. The door closed with a soft click. Lynn sat in the donation chair, his arm burning where the needle had been, his head spinning from blood loss and shock and guilt, so heavy he could barely breathe under it. Twin boys, his sons, children he didn't know existed, children she'd carried alone because he'd made her feel unwanted. The door opened. Dr. Okoye entered. She looked tired. Her scrubs were stained with blood. His blood, maybe hers, maybe the baby's. Her face was drawn, but she was standing. That had to mean something. "Mr. Lewis." He stood up too fast. The room tilted. He steadied himself on the chair, his hand gripping the armrest. "Is she?" "She's alive. The transfusion is working. Her blood pressure is stabilizing. We're not out of danger yet, but she's fighting." Dr. Okoye studied him with sharp, assessing eyes. "You saved her life." Lynn's legs felt weak. He sat back down, heavily, like someone had cut his strings. "And the babies?" Stable. They were born premature. They'll need time in the NICU, monitoring, support, but they're breathing on their own. They're strong, like their mother. Can I?" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "Tried again. Can I see them?" "Yes, but there's something you should understand first." Dr. Okoye pulled over the other chair and sat down, facing him directly. "Your ex-wife came in here alone. No family, no support. No one listed in her file except you. And that was old information from before the divorce. She's been doing this entirely on her own. Carrying twins, working, surviving, all of it alone. I didn't know, Lynn said quietly. I didn't know she was pregnant. I'm sure you didn't, but you're the one who left. You're the one who filed for divorce. And she's the one who paid the price for that decision. Those boys in there, they're yours. Biologically, the DNA is clear from the blood typing. What you do with that information is your choice. But they're here. They're real. And they need someone. Dr. Okoye stood. Think about that before you see them. Because once you walk through that door, once you see their faces, you can't unknow it. You can't walk away again, not without knowing exactly what you're abandoning this time. She left. Lynn sat alone in the donation room, the weight of her words pressing down on him like physical force. They're yours. He stood slowly, walked to the door, out into the hallway. A nurse, not Pilar, someone younger with kind eyes, saw him and pointed. NICU is that way. Their door on the right. Lynn followed the directions. His feet felt disconnected from his body, like he was floating, like none of this was real, and any moment he'd wake up in his apartment and realize it was all a dream. But the fluorescent lights were too bright to be a dream, the antiseptic smell too sharp, the fear in his chest too real. The NICU was behind glass walls. Inside, rows of incubators held tiny humans in various stages of survival, babies smaller than he'd thought possible, babies fighting for every breath. He found the nurse's station. He didn't know how to say it. I'm here for the Lewis babies. The nurse smiled, genuinely smiled. The twins. Come with me. This way. She led him to 2 incubators side by side. Inside each one, impossibly small, lay a baby. Tubes and wires connected them to machines. Monitors beeped steady rhythms. But beneath all the medical equipment, beneath all the machinery keeping them alive, Lynn could see them, his sons. They were tiny, fragile. Their skin was thin and red, almost translucent. Their eyes were closed. Their fingers were so small, but they were perfect. Absolutely perfect. This one is baby A, the nurse said, pointing to the left incubator. And this is baby B. They haven't been named yet. Do you know if Mom had names picked out? Lynn shook his head. He couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Can I touch them? Through the ports, yes. Like this, she showed him how. He reached through the opening in the incubator. His hand looked enormous next to baby A, overwhelming. He touched the tiny hand with one finger, barely a whisper of contact. The baby's fingers uncurled, wrapped around his finger, held on with surprising strength. Lynn's throat closed. Tears he didn't know he'd been holding back spilled over, hot and unstoppable. Hey, he whispered. Hey there. He couldn't say it, couldn't claim it yet. I'm your father, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry your mother had to do this alone. The baby held his finger, small, trusting, alive because of blood Lynn had just given, connected in ways that went deeper than he could understand. Lynn moved to the second incubator. Baby B, he reached through the port, touched the tiny hand. This one grabbed his finger too, held on with that same surprising strength for something so fragile, so new to the world. You're fighters, Lynn said softly, tears streaming down his face. Both of you, just like your mother. The mother I abandoned. The mother who almost died bringing you into the world because I wasn't there to help her. He stood there, both hands holding onto his sons, and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done, what he'd lost, what he'd almost destroyed. I don't know if she'll forgive me, he whispered to them. I don't know if she'll even want to see me. But I promise you, I promise both of you, I'm not leaving again. I'm here now, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for abandoning you. Mr. Lewis, Pilar appeared beside him. Your ex-wife is awake. Lynn looked at the babies one more time, memorized their faces, their tiny hands, the way they looked peaceful despite all the tubes and wires, then carefully extracted his fingers from their grips. Take me to her. They walked through the hallways in silence. Lynn's heart was beating too fast. What would he say? How could he possibly explain? How could he apologize for something this enormous? Pilar stopped outside a door. She's weak. Be gentle. And Mr. Lewis? She doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know you gave blood. She thinks she survived on her own. Whatever you say to her, make it count." She opened the door. The room was dim. Machines beeped quietly. And in the bed, pale but breathing, was the woman he'd left. She was asleep. Her face was turned toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass outside. The same rain he'd driven through to get here. The city continuing on, indifferent to miracles. Lynn moved closer, slowly, like approaching something sacred, something that might disappear if he moved too quickly. He could see the IV in her arm, the monitors tracking her vitals, the evidence of how close she'd come to leaving this world, to taking their sons with her. He wanted to speak, to say her name, to say something, but his voice wouldn't work. The words stuck in his throat like stones, so he just stood there, watching her breathe, watching the rise and fall of her chest, watching her live, his blood in her veins, keeping her here, keeping her with their sons, connecting them in ways divorce papers couldn't sever. A nurse brought in a chair. Lynn sat. He didn't plan to stay long, just until she woke up, just until he could see her eyes open and know she was really okay. But exhaustion hit him like a wave. The blood donation, the drive through the rain, the shock of everything, the crushing weight of guilt, all of it crashed over him at once. His head dropped. His eyes closed, and he slept without meaning to, his hand resting on the edge of her bed, reaching for something he'd thrown away, something he thought he didn't want, something that turned out to be everything. Chapter 9. The Vigil. Some silences hold more than words ever could. Lynn woke to the sound of machines beeping and someone moving in the hallway. His neck ached from the angle he'd slept at. The chair was uncomfortable, designed for short visits, not overnight vigils. His arm throbbed where the needle had been, a dull, persistent pain that reminded him why he was here. He looked at the bed. She was still asleep, still breathing, still here. Grey morning light filtered through the window, soft and diffused. Rain had stopped. The world outside looked washed clean, like it had been given a second chance, like maybe he'd been given one too, though he didn't deserve it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out carefully, not wanting to wake her. 6 missed calls from Michael Paul. A dozen text messages asking where he was, if everything was okay, whether things were still on track. He didn't read them. Just turned the phone to silent and put it away. None of that mattered right now. The plans, the ambitions, the world that had consumed so much of his attention while his wife carried his children alone. All of it felt distant, meaningless, like it belonged to a different person living a different life. A person he didn't want to be anymore. A nurse came in, different from the night shift. Younger, with tired eyes that suggested she'd been working double shifts. She looked surprised to see him still there. "Oh, you're still here. Is that a problem?" "No, just most people don't stay. Especially ex-husbands." There was no judgment in her voice, just observation. Lynn flinched at the words anyway. Ex-husband, the title he'd fought for, the freedom he'd demanded, the mistake he'd made. The nurse checked the monitors, made notes on a tablet, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "She's doing much better. Vitals are stable. She'll probably wake up soon. And the babies?" "Holding their own. Premature twins are always a concern, but they're fighters. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." She glanced at him, her expression softening. "You should go see them. They're beautiful. Perfect little fighters." The nurse left. Lynn sat in the silence, watching her sleep. He tried to remember the last time he'd seen her face this peaceful. Before he'd told her he wanted out. Before he'd broken her heart. Before he'd walked away thinking he was doing the right thing. He couldn't remember. That realization hurt more than the needle had. He studied her face in the dim light. The way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks, the way her mouth was slightly open as she breathed, the way she looked vulnerable and strong at the same time, the way she'd always looked when she slept, back when they shared a bed and he'd wake up first just to watch her, back when he'd had everything and didn't know it. She'd carried their children alone, had faced doctor appointments and fears, and the slow transformation of her body without anyone to share it with. had made decisions about their futures without his input, because he'd made it clear he didn't want to be part of her future. The thought made his chest ache, made him want to wake her up and apologize for everything, for every moment she'd been alone, for every tear she'd cried, for every time she'd wondered if she could do this by herself. But he knew why she hadn't told him. Because he'd left her. Because he'd made it clear their marriage was over. Because telling him would have meant admitting she still needed him when he'd made it clear he didn't need her. His phone buzzed again. Michael Paul wasn't giving up. Lynn stood, walked into the hallway to answer, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't disturb other patients. "Where the hell are you?" Michael Paul's voice was sharp with worry and frustration. "You disappeared last night." "I've been calling for hours. The investors are asking questions. I'm at the hospital. Is everything okay?" Lynn almost laughed. Nothing was okay. Everything had been shattered and reassembled into a shape he didn't recognize. "My ex-wife had twins. Last night. Emergency delivery. They're mine." Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that meant Michael Paul was processing information that didn't fit into his worldview. "Then what?" "She was pregnant when I divorced her. When I left her. She never told me. She almost died last night. They all almost died. I gave blood. He stopped, realizing he was rambling. "I'm not leaving, not yet. Not ever again. Lynn, that's Jesus. Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. I need to take some time. Everything we've been working on, it has to wait." "Wait? Lynn, we've been building this for months. Everything's lined up. The investors are expecting—" "I know what they're expecting. But I have sons, twin sons, that I didn't know about because I left their mother." His voice was harder than he meant it to be. "I wasn't there for her, for them. I told her she was holding me back when she was carrying my children. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm not choosing anything over them again." Michael Paul was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, less about numbers and more about the friendship they'd had before money and ambition complicated everything. "Okay, I get it. Family first. We'll figure it out. Take whatever time you need, but Lynn, when you're ready to talk about what happened, about all of it, I'm here. Not as a business partner, as a friend. Thank you. And Lynn, for what it's worth, you being there now matters. You can't change the past, but you can change what comes next." Lynn hung up and stood in the hallway, looking back through the window at the room where she slept, where the mother of his children was recovering from nearly dying, from giving everything to bring 2 lives into the world while he celebrated his freedom somewhere across the city. He turned off his phone completely, slipped it back into his pocket, went back into the room. She was still asleep. He returned to his chair, to his vigil, to the watching and waiting that felt more important than anything he'd ever done. An hour passed, maybe more. Time had stopped meaning much. Doctors came in, checked her progress, left satisfied. Nurses rotated. The morning shift became the afternoon shift. The world moved on, indifferent to individual dramas. Lynn didn't move. He watched her breathe, counted the steady rise and fall of her chest, found a rhythm in it that was oddly calming. She was alive. That was all that mattered right now. She was alive and breathing, and their sons were alive and breathing, and somehow, against all odds, they'd all survived the night. Despite him. Not because of him. Later, Pilar appeared with coffee and a sandwich. "You need to eat." "I'm fine." "You donated blood last night. You need to replace it. Eat." She set the food on the table beside him, her expression stern but kind. She left. Lynn looked at the sandwich without interest. Hospital cafeteria food wrapped in plastic. But she was right. He needed strength. If she woke up, if she let him explain, if she gave him even 5 minutes to apologize for everything, he needed to be strong enough for that conversation. He forced himself to eat, tasting nothing, just going through the motions. The coffee helped, hot and bitter and real. It grounded him, reminded him this wasn't a dream or a nightmare. This was happening. He was sitting in a hospital room, watching the woman he'd abandoned recover, while their sons fought for life down the hall. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. How could he have been so blind? How could he have convinced himself that leaving was the right choice? How could he have looked at the woman he loved and decided she wasn't worth fighting for? The answers wouldn't come. Or maybe they would, but he didn't want to face them. That he'd been selfish. That he'd listened to the wrong people. That he'd valued ambition over love. That he'd been a coward. Through the window he could see into the hallway. Doctors conferring over charts. Nurses laughing at something, finding joy even in a place of suffering. Life continuing like it always did, indifferent to individual tragedies and miracles alike. Down the hall, his sons were in their incubators, Baby A and Baby B, clinical labels for children who deserved real names. Names their mother had probably chosen. Names he had no right to know, but desperately wanted to. He thought about going back to see them. To touch their tiny hands again, to feel that grip that seemed to say, "We are here, we made it, don't leave us again." But he couldn't leave her, not until she woke up, and he could see in her eyes whether there was any chance of forgiveness, whether she'd even let him be part of their lives, whether she should. The afternoon wore on. The light through the window changed from grey to gold as the sun tried to break through the clouds that had dumped rain on the city all night. Lynn watched it all from his chair, a silent guardian keeping watch over someone who had every right to tell him to leave. But he stayed anyway, because leaving was what had caused all of this, and he wasn't going to make that mistake again. Later, a doctor came in, not Dr. Okoye, someone younger with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He checked her vitals with satisfaction, nodding to himself as he reviewed the numbers. "She's doing remarkably well," he said, looking at Lynn. "The transfusion worked perfectly. Her body is responding. She should wake soon. And then what? Then we monitor her. Make sure there are no complications. She'll need rest, support. The road ahead won't be easy. Twin infants, recovery from trauma, emotional processing. She'll need help. A lot of it. I want to help," Lynn said, "if she'll let me." The doctor studied him. "That's between you and her. But I will say this, showing up matters. Being here matters. What you did before is in the past. What you do next is what counts." The doctor left. Lynn sat with those words. What you do next is what counts. The door opened again, Dr. Okoye this time. She looked less exhausted than she had during the night shift, like a few hours of rest had restored her. "Mr. Lewis, still here." "Where else would I be?" She studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Most ex-husbands who filed for divorce don't camp out like this, especially ones who've moved on with their lives. "I didn't move on. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I'm beginning to see that." She checked the monitors, made notes on her tablet. She'll wake soon. When she does, she's going to have questions about what happened, about how she survived, about the babies, about why you're here. I'll answer what I can. I'll tell her the truth, that I was wrong, that I'm sorry, that I want to be here for them, if she'll let me. Will you tell her you're the reason she's alive? Lynn thought about it. I don't know. Maybe that's something the doctors should tell her. I don't want her to feel obligated to forgive me just because I gave blood. I want her to forgive me if she does, because I've earned it. Not because she feels like she owes me. Dr. Okoye nodded approvingly. You might be smarter than you look, Mr. Lewis. Just be gentle. She's been through trauma, physical and emotional. She carried your children alone because you left. That's going to take time to heal, if it heals at all. I know. I understand. She left. Lynn sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of what was coming. The conversation they'd have to have. The questions that needed answers. The apology that would never be enough. The afternoon faded toward evening. Golden light slanted through the windows, making everything look softer, more hopeful. Like maybe endings could become beginnings if you were brave enough to try. The hospital settled into its evening rhythm, quieter, slower, the frantic energy of day shift giving way to the watchful calm of night. Lynn's eyelids grew heavy again. He fought it. Wanted to be awake when she woke. Wanted to be there to see her eyes open. To be the first thing she saw. Or maybe the last thing she wanted to see. He didn't know. But exhaustion won. His head dropped forward, his breathing slowed, sleep took him without permission. And in the bed, unnoticed at first, her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered, her chest moved with a deeper breath, the kind of breath that meant consciousness returning. That meant the journey back from wherever she'd been. She was coming back. In the NICU, baby A opened his eyes for the first time, really opened them. Then baby B, two tiny boys seeing the world in full focus. Two lives beginning while their parents slept in separate silences, connected by blood and choice, and something neither could name yet, but both could feel. The nurse on duty noticed, made notes, smiled to herself at the coincidence of timing, mother and sons waking at the same moment. "Welcome to the world, little ones," she whispered, adjusting their blankets. "Your father is here. He's trying. That has to count for something." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned purple and orange and deep blue. And in room 847, two people who'd been torn apart by his choice slept within arm's reach, connected by blood and biology, and something neither could name, but would have to. Soon. Chapter 10. The Blood We Share. Sometimes the end of one story is the beginning of another, and sometimes they're the same. She woke to rain on the window, soft, rhythmic. The sound pulled her slowly from the dark place she'd been floating in. Her chest burned, her limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. She tried to remember the apartment, the pain, the floor, then nothing, just dark and distant voices and falling. She opened her eyes. The room was dim, grey light through blinds. Morning or evening, she couldn't tell. She turned her head, slow, painful, and saw him. Lynn, slumped in a chair beside her bed, wrinkled clothes, messy hair, dark circles under his eyes, and on his arm, fresh IV marks. Her breath caught. Why was he here? Why was the man who'd left her sitting beside her hospital bed? "Lynn?" The word came out as a whisper. Rough, barely there. He stirred, his eyes opened. Confusion, then recognition. Then something that looked like relief and guilt mixed together. "You're awake," he said. His voice was hoarse, broken. "What are you doing here?" He sat up slowly, reached for water, held the straw to her lips with shaking hands. She drank, suspicious but too thirsty to refuse. "The hospital called me," he said. "You were still listed as my emergency contact from before." Before, when they were married, when he still wanted her. Why would they? Then she remembered. "The babies, are they?" "They're alive, both of them. They're in the NICU, small but breathing. They're fighters. Both of them, twin boys." She pressed her hand to her stomach, flat now, empty, and the loss hit her. "Can I see them?" "Soon. You need rest first. But they're okay. I promise." She looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion, at the marks on his arm, at the way he sat too close. "You gave blood," she said. He nodded. "They couldn't find a match. You were dying." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Why would you do that? You left me. You divorced me. You told me I was holding you back. Why would you come here?" Lynn flinched like she'd slapped him. "Because you're the mother of my children. Because I was wrong. Because—" his voice broke. "Because I'm sorry." She stared at him. "You didn't know about them. How could you be sorry for abandoning children you didn't know existed?" "I'm not sorry for that. I mean, I am, but—" He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm sorry for leaving you, for making you feel like you weren't enough, for being so focused on myself that I convinced myself our marriage was the problem. You weren't the problem, I was." "You're sorry," she repeated. The words felt hollow. "You left me. You broke my heart. You made me feel like I was worthless. And now you're sorry." "Yes, I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." But I need you to know, I was wrong. About everything, walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Tears slipped down her face, hot and angry and sad all at once. Do you know what it was like? Finding out I was pregnant after you'd already left. Sitting in that doctor's office alone, seeing 2 heartbeats on that screen, knowing you'd chosen to walk away. Every appointment, every kick, every moment, I was terrified something would go wrong. I was alone, because you decided I wasn't worth staying for. I know. I'm so sorry. Stop saying that. Her voice cracked. Sorry doesn't give me back those months. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you looked at me and decided I wasn't enough. That our life together wasn't enough. Lynn leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You're right. I can't change what I did. I can't take back the pain I caused. But I'm here now. And if you'll give me even the smallest chance, I want to be here for you and for them. Not because I gave blood, not because I feel obligated, but because I love you. I never stopped loving you. I just convinced myself that love wasn't enough. And now? Now I know love is the only thing that matters. Everything else, everything I thought was important, means nothing without you. She closed her eyes, felt the tears continue. I don't know if I can trust you again. Then don't. Not yet. Just let me be here. Let me prove I've changed. Let me meet our sons and be the father I should have been from the beginning. What are their names? She asked, changing the subject, needing to focus on something else. Did you see them? I did. They're perfect, but they don't have names yet. The nurses are calling them Baby A and Baby B. Bill, she said, and Balmer. Lynn nodded. Strong names, survivor names. They had to be survivors. They had no choice. He squeezed her hand gently. She almost pulled away, almost, but she was too tired, and his hand was warm. Then he did something unexpected. He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, to where his heart beat steady and strong, where her blood now flowed inside him too. She felt it, the rhythm, the life, the connection. Your blood is in me, he said quietly. Mine is in you. The divorce papers said we were done. But this says we're connected in ways that go deeper than any document. We share the same blood now, literally. She didn't pull away, just rested her hand there, feeling the proof they were both still here, still alive, still possible. I don't forgive you, she whispered. Not yet, maybe not ever. What you did, it broke something in me. I know, and I'll spend every day trying to earn your forgiveness, even if it takes forever, even if you never give it to me. I'm not leaving again. Outside, the rain stopped. Clouds parted. The first light of dawn broke through, golden and new. Down the hall, Bill and Balmer opened their eyes, 2 tiny boys who carried the blood of a love that had refused to die, who would grow up knowing their father had made a terrible mistake but had fought his way back. Lynn looked at the woman. In the bed, the mother of his children, the keeper of his heart, the person he'd almost lost forever. And she looked back with eyes that held years of pain and something else, something that looked like the smallest glimmer of hope. No words. Not yet. Words would come later. Apologies, explanations, decisions about what came next. But right. Now, there was only this. 2 people who'd lost everything, finding their way back through blood and choice and the refusal to give up. Love that had survived even when everything else died, even when he'd tried to kill it himself.